Hi and welcome back. I've been in Antalya for a couple of weeks now, just long enough to get a lay of the land, and I wanted to go over some of my first impressions, but also I want to really talk about how much things cost. So I'm going to do what I normally do. I'll share some logistics, how to get here and away, but I'll put chapters in the description below so that if you're interested just in the costs, that will be at the end of the video and you can skip forward to that. Antalya used to be a place that people came because it was affordable, and today I'm going to talk about whether or not that's still true. With the ongoing inflation in the country, the prices are definitely not as inexpensive as they used to be, and I've definitely had some moments of surprise. So stick around to the very end, I'll tell you the thing that really threw me off. And if you're considering coming to Antalya for vacation or slow travel, you'll get a better picture of what to expect right now. This is the first of a 3-video series about Antalya. In the next video, I'll talk about some of the things to do around here. And in the last video, I'll go over what I actually spent for a 1-month stay in Antalya. If you're new here, my name is Kirya, and I've traveled to almost 60 countries over the last 25 years. And last year, I retired early to travel the world full-time. I love talking about travel, and also I like talking about how much things cost. I love going to the grocery store and exploring the prices of things in different countries. So let's get started. Before I start, I just want to encourage you to check the prices of things when you're here or before you come here, because I watched a video from last year, not even a year ago, and the cost of the tram from the airport was basically about a quarter of the amount that it currently is in Turkish lira. So obviously the exchange rate was also different, so the actual dollar price may be similar, but just make sure you do a little bit of research before you come, because the prices are changing and the exchange rate is changing very frequently. So first, let's talk about getting here. I flew into Antalya, and the airport is not too far away from the city, and you have several ways of getting into town from the airport. You can take a taxi, but I would warn you, just make sure you go to the taxi stand. Don't accept any rides from any taxi drivers that aren't part of the taxi rank. And there is a set price to go from the airport to town. And currently it's about 25 to 30 US dollars, and it takes roughly 25 to 30 minutes. There is a scam with taxis, and Turkey is one of the countries that you might find this. So you can find my video about scams here, and it does cover that a little bit. The next way that you can get into town is on a dolmuş. A dolmuş is like a little van, so it's a little smaller than a regular bus, and it usually travels one set line, and it doesn't always leave until it's full, so it doesn't necessarily have a schedule, and you usually have to pay cash on board, and it depends on how far you're going. So you'll see those when you walk out of the airport, and you just need to ask them to go to the Kaliçi neighborhood if you're staying in the city center. That's the old town section, and they will help you get on from there. The way that I did it though, and I think this was very easy and not very expensive, was to take the tram. The tram is called the Retiree, and when you go up to the platform, there's a machine that you can buy a ticket from, or you can just tap your credit card or your phone in to the reader, like where the gate is, it'll let you in, and then when you exit, you don't have to do anything. So you can buy a card to ride the public transportation, and I think currently the card costs 10 Turkish lira, and if you buy the card, you'll get a reduced rate. So I think right now the reduced rate is 27 lira, and if you just tap your card into the turnstile, it's 33 lira. Both of them are a little bit under $1. The station at the airport is called, I'm probably going to butcher this, but Havalimanı, and the station that I got off at, which is basically the city center, is called the İsmet Paşa stop. And the train keeps going, and it goes all the way to Konyaaltı Beach and to a town called Fethiye, I think. Don't quote me on that. But basically, it keeps going. So if you're not staying in the city center where the old town is, then you may still be able to take the tram. I arrived at the airport around 10:30 p.m. and I didn't feel unsafe at all taking the train. And in fact, there were a lot of people on the train. People in Antalya stay up fairly late. So 11 o'clock at night, there were still plenty of people roaming the streets. You can also easily get into the city by bus from cities like Istanbul or Ankara or Fethiye. And the best website I've found is called Obilet, and you can find out the prices for that. The rides are a little bit long. I think from Istanbul, it's about 12 to 14 hours, and it costs roughly 1,000 lira, which is about $26. You can also take the dolmuş for some of the shorter travels, but I've found there's not really a website that you can book them. You have to kind of just go and wait and get on them. So it's a little bit more difficult if you're trying to plan ahead. To get around town, you can also take the tram, or you can just take the regular bus. There's public transportation. And again, you can just tap your card right on the card reader, and it just charges you the 33 lira. You can also take dolmuş from different places in town to wherever you're going. And again, that's going to depend on how far you're going for your fare. I rented a 1-bedroom Airbnb just outside the Caliche neighborhood. I didn't really want to be in the middle of the touristy area, but I wanted to be close enough to it that I could walk. And it cost about $1,200. This was a little bit more than I had wanted to pay, but unfortunately that was pretty much the going rate. I considered also staying in Fedia for a month instead of Antalya, but Fedia was even more expensive. If you're going to stay for a longer term, you could get an apartment for $500 to $700 for a longer term stay, but of course that doesn't include any utilities or anything like that. If you were thinking of buying an apartment, the rate is roughly $110 to $170 per square foot at the moment. I like the neighborhood I'm staying in, and it's really easy to walk to the Caliche neighborhood and also Conyalty Beach, so I do recommend it as far as an area to stay in. There's tons of grocery stores. It's a little bit more of a compacted part of town, so some of them are kind of small, but there's Schok, there's Migros, there's Carrefour City, and these vary in size, but you can pretty much get anything that you want there. In addition, there's larger grocery stores. There's one called 5M Migros, which is like the hypermarket, the hypermarché, and this has a lot more stuff, including like housewares and things like that. But none of those are really very close to me. The other thing is the local markets. So each day of the week, there's a market somewhere, and in my neighborhood, it's on Friday. And that's usually fruit and vegetables, cheese, nuts, things like that. And for me, that's my preferred way of getting fresh stuff. So I usually go there for my produce and fruit, and then I go to Migros for eggs and things like that. You can also buy eggs in the Friday market though. All of the regular supermarkets and convenience stores take credit cards, but on the Friday market, I usually use cash. I have noticed some of the vendors do have a credit card machine, but I am not counting on that, and I just bring cash just in case. As far as walking goes, generally there are sidewalks. They're not always great. If you're in the more touristy area or the area near the beach, then you're gonna have a nice wide promenade. But if you go outside of that, you're gonna find the sidewalks to be varied. Most of the time they're okay. There are sometimes crossings for where the lights are, but a lot of times I just end up kind of darting across the road, to be honest. And some of the sidewalks have bricks and they're not very even, and some of them are cracked and broken, so you will just have to be aware of that. If you have any accessibility issues, you should be fine on most of the promenades near the water, but some of the places that aren't near the water are a little bit iffy. As far as running goes, again, you can go on the promenade. If you go to Conyalty Beach, there is a 7-kilometer, which is roughly a little under 5 miles. There's a walkway that far, so you could go back and forth there for as much as you want. And also, along the edge of the ocean, there's pretty wide sidewalk most of the time, so there's plenty of opportunity to go there. As far as running in the other parts of the town that aren't quite as touristy, they're a little bit busy and they're not really what I prefer, so I usually just do an out and back out to the beach. As far as biking goes, there are people cycling, but the cycle lanes are not great. Sometimes there's a dedicated one like along the promenade at the beach, but in some of the other areas, there's a pretty narrow shoulder and the cars are kind of going a little bit willy-nilly, so it's not really the way that I prefer to cycle. However, there are cycling routes that you can do, and if you get out of Antalya, from what I can see, there are definitely routes up in the mountains or heading west towards Fedia, like towards the Likian Way. Those are going to be nice. So, and then you can also do bike packing in the Taurus Mountains, which are nearby. So there are options, but as far as in town itself, it's not like the most ideal place to cycle. I noticed a lot of the bicyclists actually ride in the tram line, and then if the tram comes, they just kind of get up onto the sidewalk. So that's the other thing. You're going to see a lot of motorcycles and bikes on the sidewalk. So as far as going back to walking, you do have to be careful about that. As far as green spaces, I haven't found a lot of parks in town except for like the beach promenade, but there definitely are mountains very close by with plenty of hiking. There's pools and waterfalls and things like that that you can go and see. So there are opportunities, they're just a little bit further out. Okay, let's talk about some of the common concerns. One of the first ones is getting money out. And this actually is a concern. There are so many different ATMs, and a lot of them will actually charge you an extra fee on top of your fee. So you really have to be careful when you're getting cash out, because you'll see an option for direct currency conversion, which is called DCC, and you definitely want to say no to that. What happens if you say yes is they will do the currency conversion for you, and they will give you a horrible rate. So for example, I went to one ATM. Right now the US dollar is about 38 lira to $1, and the ATM, if you do the direct currency conversion was going to give me a rate of about 34 lira to the dollar. So clearly it's not in your favor. The unfortunate thing is sometimes even when you choose no for the direct currency conversion, they still charge a fee on top of the money that you get out. So for example, again, I got out some money, so they charged me basically about 8% fee on top of the money that I got out. The good thing is I have a Fidelity debit card, so that's another reason to get either the Fidelity or the Schwab debit cards, and they refund those fees. However, you just need to be careful because it's really hit and miss, and basically a lot of times all the ATMs will be lined up next to each other, so you can go to one, and if it charges you or wants to charge you, you can cancel that and go to the next one. There are often like 5 or 6 or 7 of them in a row. So I can talk a little bit about that more, but I've found a couple of banks that don't charge you. So I'll put a picture of a couple of them up on the screen right now. You definitely do want to get some cash out though, because like I said, the Friday markets are cash only. Some of the tours you do need cash. So for instance, I went to one tour where you pay the fee to get your guide, and then you also have to pay the entrance fee on top of that for the actual attraction, and that needs to be paid in cash. So it's a really good idea to have cash. You can change your cash on the street, and sometimes the rates aren't that bad actually, so that's also an option. You just need to shop around. I would suggest do not do it in the airport. So let's talk about safety. Obviously, as a solo traveler, this is a concern of mine, and surprisingly, Antalya is actually almost as safe as Krakow, which is the safest place that I've been so far. So it's kind of surprising, but the crime index is 29, in which lower is better, and the safety index is 71, in which higher is better. So actually, it's quite safe. And like I said, people stay out very late, and so it's not uncommon to walk around at 10:30, 11 o'clock, midnight. And I even had a tour that I had to meet them at 4:30 in the morning, and I walked to the place where we were meeting and didn't feel unsafe at all. As far as being a solo traveler, meeting up with people, things like that, I've actually found it quite easy. There's a good expat group in Antalya. There's a good Facebook group. There's a couple of different meetup things for languages and coffee and whatnot. And there's a hiking group. So I've found a lot of different ways to meet up with people in Antalya. So if that's something that's a concern to you, it shouldn't be an issue. As far as language barrier goes, definitely in the touristy areas, you're going to find that most people speak some English. And then generally, if people are under like 35, they're going to speak some English. The only place that I've found that nobody's really spoken too much English is my Friday market. But all I really need to know how to say is bir kilo, which is 1 kilo. And then I just point at the vegetable that I want and we're good to go. So I've had no issues with it as far as a barrier, but they don't really speak as much English there. As far as cultural differences go, it's definitely not as common for people to be showing their knees or their shoulders. So I know that Antalya is a beach town, and definitely you can spot the foreigners because they're wearing shorts or tank tops, but it's not very common for the locals to be wearing that kind of clothing. You don't need to fully cover yourself, but I do think that it is good to be a little more respectful when you're not on the beach. Of course, when you're at the beach, people are still wearing swimming suits and going swimming and everything like that. But I think that one thing that I've noticed is that if you're not at the beach, definitely it's not common for people to be wearing skimpy clothing. The other thing is that you'll have to get used to the call to prayer. And the earliest one is at 5:30 in the morning, roughly, and the latest one is usually around 9. So it's definitely something that you'll be woken up by if you're not used to. The other thing is that if you're in the Kalichi neighborhood or any of the bazaar areas, you're definitely going to be asked to buy stuff. You're going to be told, come on in, take a look, and this. You may feel a little pressured, but actually people are mostly nice. They're not really as pushy as they are in some other countries. So if you just say no thank you, you should be good to go. So as far as weather goes, Antalya is actually a great place because in the wintertime, the lows usually aren't any colder than the mid-40s. And in the summertime, it can get pretty hot. It can get into the mid-90s. So definitely the best time to visit is right now, which is when I'm here, which is April or March, probably. And those are going to be the months that are the least rainy, but also the best weather. As far as medical care goes, there are at least 5 hospitals near me, and the word for hospital is hastanesi, so that is something that's important to know. And they actually have great medical care here. I have had to go to the hospital before in Turkey, and it was not very expensive. The doctor spoke good English. It was very high quality. In fact, a lot of people come here for medical tourism and dental tourism, so you're going to have no problem getting good health care in Turkey. As far as food and water safety goes, I was told not to drink the tap water in Antalya, but that you can use the water for tea if it's boiled. You can get like a 5-liter or 10-liter jug of water for like $1, so not a problem. There's no US embassy in Antalya, but there is a British embassy, and there are a few embassies for some of the other European countries, but there's not any North American embassies in Antalya. You would have to go to Istanbul or Ankara for that. Okay, now we come to the fun part. Let's talk about the cost of everything. I've noticed a huge variation in cost, and I'm kind of break it down based on that. If you're in the Caliche neighborhood, which is touristy, or the Konyaaltı neighborhood, which is where the beach is, those are going to cost a little bit more. So I'm going to go over those two first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the malls, because you can go to the mall and get goods and services and food. And then I'll talk about going outside of the touristy areas and outside of the mall. And last but not least, I'll go over some of my grocery costs. But first, let me talk really quickly, I almost forgot, about the cost of attractions. You can get a tour to some of these places, but oftentimes the tour does not include the entrance fee. So for instance, the entrance fee to Pamukkale is about 30 euros, which is about $32. And the entrance fee to this place, which I'm going to butcher the name, is Purge, is 15 euros, which is about $17. And a walking tour is roughly $10 to $15. So those are kind of a few examples of some of the attractions. Also, like I said, the cost of the bus is 33 liras, which is about 86 cents. And the cost of a taxi down to Konyaaltı Beach, which is about 3 miles, is going to run you about $6 to $8. And a bike rental for the day is 10 euros, which is about $11. And plus you have to pay an extra euro for your helmet. So that's basically another $1. Okay, so for dining out, here are some examples. Let's start with the Old Town. Just note, these are all the low-end prices, so obviously you could go just up from here, but I'm going to start with just talking about the lower-end spectrum. For an appetizer, you can expect to pay about $9. For lunch, they start at around $13. For dinner, about $26. Coffee is about $4. A beer is about $5 to $6. And a fresh juice is about $2.75. Now let's talk about the prices at Konyaaltı. For a burger, it's about $14. A pizza is about $16. A medium doner is about $6. Fries are about $2.30. Soda is about $1.32. So altogether, that doner, fries, and soda is going to run you almost $10. A coffee is about $3.50, and that's just a plain coffee. A latte is about $4.50. And a beer, and this is a Budweiser, bottom of the line, no offense, is about $4.50. If you go to the mall, you can expect to pay about $9 for a McDonald's burger, fries, and Coke combo. About $11 for a chicken sandwich, drink, and fries combo at a local restaurant. About $5 for a pizza and Coke combo. About $5 for a pasta dish. And about $120 for a pair of running shoes. If you go outside the touristy area, you can find pants for about $6, shirts for about $8 to $9, a doner for about $4, breakfast or lunch for around $7, a borek for about $2, a coffee, like a Turkish coffee, for about $1.30, and a Turkish tea for about 40 cents. I also went out to lunch a couple of times outside of the Caliche neighborhood, and I paid roughly $5 to $8. You can also buy beer in the grocery store for about $2 to $2.50, depending on whether it's local or not. And the thing that really chaps my hide, and this is because I'm specifically looking to buy it, is the price of sunscreen. I haven't really found one that's cheaper than $10, and that's for just a little tiny one. So let me give you a couple of examples. For a 200 milliliter bottle, it's about $16. And for a 270 milliliter bottle of a different brand, that's about $26. 26 US dollars for a bottle of sunscreen. So now let me go over some normal grocery costs by showing you my latest grocery haul. Okay, I just did my first tiny grocery haul, and the store that I went to is called the A101, and it wasn't huge. It's just kind of more of a convenience store, a little bit bigger than a convenience store, but anyway, so I only got a few things, but I thought I would go over them. The first thing is potatoes. This is not quite 2 kilos of potatoes, so it's 1.89 kilos of potatoes. Anyway, it comes out to basically $1.52 a pound. Eggs, it's a 15 pack. For this 15 pack, it costs $2.17. Butter, this is 500 grams, but it basically costs $5.48 a pound. 1 liter of kefir costs 96 cents. 1 liter of milk costs 89 cents. This is like my favorite cheese. When I lived in Istanbul, I used to buy this and mix it with chickpeas, tomatoes, sometimes corn, and then a little oil and vinegar, like a Greek salad kind of. So it's similar to feta. You can hear it has liquid inside of it. Anyway, this is a 400 gram container, and it costs $2.50. This is a local Turkish thing as well. It's called manti or manti. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but this is a 350 gram package, so a little under a pound, and this cost $1.17. The total for everything there was about $17. It's time for another grocery haul. So let me get started. I have my cheat sheet here with the translations. So first thing I got today were tomatoes. This whole thing costs 30 Turkish lira, which is about 60 cents a pound. 1 kilo of rice costs 26 lira, which is 31 cents a pound. A can of corn, this is 340 grams, and it costs $32.95, which is 87 cents. I always like to get some local things, so I got some olives. So this is 200 grams of olives, and it costs 45 Turkish lira, which is $2.69 a pound. I got some bread, which these are like a olive loaf baguette. Two of them. They were 33 lira each, which is 89 cents. I got some chicken bouillon, which was 42 lira, which is $1.10. I got some cookies. This was 40 lira, which is 105. I got some cucumbers. This is 3 kind of medium-sized cucumbers, and that was 43 lira, which is 96 cents a pound. 96 cents a pound. I got some fancy vinegars, and this was $84.95, which is $2.24. Last but not least, I got this. This cake was 71 Turkish lira, which is $1.87. There we go. That's today's haul. This is very exciting. Today's grocery haul is brought to you by the Friday Market. So every week they have a market, and it's different in different neighborhoods, but in my neighborhood it's on Friday, so I just went to that. Don't make fun of my hair because I just went swimming and then I went grocery shopping, and I just was so excited I had to show the produce right away. Actually, I wanted to do it before I forget the price. This, look at this thing. It's huge. Look, it's bigger than my head. Was 10 lira, so that's about 26 cents in dollars. I got a kilo of mandarins for 30 Turkish lira, which is about 79 cents. I got a kilo of, look at these tomatoes. Aren't those pretty? These were 40 Turkish lira, which is just over $1. But then after I bought them, I was walking around and I noticed some of them are like 15 lira and 20 lira for a kilo. So, but these are pretty good quality. And I already ate like 3 of them while I was just walking around the market. And then last but not least, I got some carrots. And these were 25 lira for the kilo, which is 66 cents. So all together, my 1 kilo of carrots, 1 kilo of tomatoes, 1 kilo of mandarins, and the lettuce bigger than my head was approximately $2.76. So I call that a win. Okay, so now I've pretty much gone over everything. You've seen all the costs and everything. And so my question to you is, do you think these costs have surprised you? Do you find them expensive? Have you recently been to the area? And what have you thought about whether or not the area is still affordable? Once again, thank you so much for watching and happy travels. And to a town called Fete, and the entrance fee to Purge.